So who is the Son of Man? The Son of Man is a title that apparently Jesus used for himself, according to our Gospels. It's especially common in the Synoptic tradition. Mark's Gospel has it a lot, and it is commonly used by Jesus as a self-referential or as a way of talking about himself. And there's a lot of discussion about whether or not Jesus using the phrase the Son of Man to refer to himself is claiming to be God. So in this video, I want to break this down. I want to show you some of the sources that we have that kind of help us understand what Jesus might have been talking about when he talks about the Son of Man. And I'm going to give you kind of two main alternatives, and most scholars fall kind of roughly within one side or the other side of these positions. So if you're ready, let's talk about the Son of Man. Before we start, my name is Chris. I have a Master of Divinity, a Master of Arts in Theology, and a PhD in Christian origins. On this channel, I talk mostly about early Christianity, so don't forget to subscribe. So let's talk about the Son of Man. I think the most important problem as we approach this is to understand that nobody actually knows what it means. We just really don't. And this is so often I find myself coming to these kinds of questions and saying, like, we have a reason to be really cautious when we interpret this because it's really not that clear what it means. It's interesting when Mark uses the Son of Man, he just kind of starts throwing it in, and Jesus is using these words apparently, and everyone seems to know what it means. Like, nobody's ever like, Jesus, what are you talking about when you use the Son of Man? So the author of the Gospel of Mark presumably believed that his audience, whoever that was, or whoever's reading the gospel, would kind of just have an understanding of what this meant. Now, this leads to a couple of interesting observations. So first of all, it's not a title that really makes sense in Greek at all. It obviously has some kind of a Semitic origin, or we could say Hebrew or Aramaic origin. And we'll look at that in a minute, what that actually is. But it's not really a title that would have made a ton of sense to Greek readers. We don't know if the historical Jesus used this title to talk about himself. It's conceivable that he may have, as we'll see from some of the different understandings of it that scholars have. We don't actually know if Jesus used this or if this is just Mark inventing this. But nevertheless, the Son of Man has come to be this really enigmatic way that Jesus describes himself in the Gospels. And one other thing, Mark is our earliest Gospel in the New Testament, but I've talked a lot about the Q theory, the theory that there is a common shared sayings Gospel behind Matthew and Luke, and it looks like that one probably has the Son of Man in it as well. So it is a pretty common way that Jesus gets described as the Son of Man. So it was probably really important, but ironically, as Joel Marcus, so I have it here, Joel Marcus says in this commentary on Mark, Joel Marcus says, the problem is that ancients seem to know more about the title than we do. So we know less than the people who are reading these Gospels about what this title meant. So that's kind of important, I think. So let's talk about what the Son of Man could actually mean. And I'm going to suggest that there are only two options. One, it's a sort of way to reference humanity, like just a generic way to reference humanity. Or two, it's possibly a term that is loaded with some kind of supernatural, angelic, implications. Three is not an option. Jesus is not saying he's God. As you will see in the evidence, we don't have any reason to think the Son of Man is a way that Jesus is calling himself God. I don't want to say that using this term as Jesus claiming to be divine, because that's kind of a complicated word, and we hear like God. And remember, we don't have Trinitarian theology in the first century. So if Jesus did actually say this, he wasn't claiming to be Yahweh. He wasn't claiming to be God. But there is a tradition of a Son of Man who has angelic authority, unique cosmic power. I'm thinking of the genie from Aladdin, and we'll look at that. So these are the two possibilities. Human being, unique angelic authority, cosmic power on a mission from God, all of those things. But three is not an option. The Son of Man is not a divine claim. So the first possibility, and I know it's the one that a lot of people will want to skip over, but we should give some really serious consideration to, is that in using the term Son of Man, Jesus, or whoever these authors are imagining Jesus, just talking about himself as a human. Now, there's a couple of different ways to read this. There's one interesting argument made by Giza Vermish that this was a common way, almost like a diminutive or almost like a humble way of saying, of referring to yourself. So if I say like, I have power to forgive sins, that sounds really like I'm full of myself. But according to this logic, if Jesus says, well, so that you may know the Son of Man has the authority to forgive sins, the argument is that this is sort of a more humble way of referring to yourself. In the first century, that was apparently common in Galilee. Now, we don't really know, but this is the argument. The argument is mostly made from later rabbinic sources, but that's interesting. The other point for this is that in the Hebrew Bible, it is often just a way to refer to a human being. So if you look at Ezekiel, for example, when God calls the prophet the Son of Man, he's not calling him divine. He's actually reminding him that he's a son of man. He's actually reminding him that he comes from some pretty humble beginnings and has been chosen to be a prophet. So there is a pretty good case that the Son of Man might refer to a human being. One other thing, I interviewed Professor Helen Bond not too long ago. She has a book on Mark. I have it here. First biography of Jesus. I'm keeping all my books close. And Helen Bond actually argues that in biography, this kind of humility was also seen as a bonus. So if Mark is writing a biography, which he is, Mark is writing a biography of Jesus, according to the conventions of ancient biography, humility was seen as a bonus. So Jesus is actually, in saying Son of Man, Jesus could be presenting himself as a way that shows his humility and would impress his readers. So those are all important things. And for those reasons, we should very seriously consider the possibility that the Son of Man is not an angelic claim. It's not a divine claim. It might just be a humble way of saying a human being. And I challenge you, if you want to go and read through Mark, go read where Mark says Son of Man, where Jesus says Son of Man in Mark. It's usually self-reference. And you will see that it does kind of make sense if you see it as a humble way to refer to yourself. Okay, the second possibility is the Son of Man is an angelic figure, probably tied up with messianic expectations. And everyone's saying, messianic, oh, that must be Jesus. Maybe. We'll look at the sources for that in a minute. But if we're going to talk about the word Messiah, let's remember that Messiah just means anointed. In Greek, it was Christos. And there were a lot of people throughout history, throughout the Hebrew Bible, there were a lot of people who were the anointed ones. Often it was the kings. So we read a lot into the term Messiah when we read it. But let's look a little bit at a couple texts, and maybe we can get a better understanding of what the alternative view of this Son of Man could be. So the really obvious place to start is Daniel chapter 7. And in Daniel chapter 7, we get a different version of the Son of Man. And this is where we start to get sort of angelic visions of the Son of Man. Now, a couple things really quick just to remember about the book of Daniel. Contrary to popular conservative belief, the book of Daniel was not written in Babylon to prophesy like all these coming futures of the world. The book of Daniel was actually written around 170 BC. It was written during a really difficult time when the Jewish people were experiencing persecution, famously under the king Antiochus Epiphanes, who very famously sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple. So this was written during a time of oppression. And this vision is very much written, if you read it through closely, and I'm not actually going to do that in this video, but if you read it through closely, understanding that whoever wrote Daniel is pretending that this guy in Babylon is having this vision that applied directly to the author's time in 170, around that time when all this happened, between 170 and 160. It will help you understand Daniel like you never have before. But in this vision, we get different kingdoms of the world. We get an arrogant horn who comes and does terrible things, and this is Antiochus Epiphanes. And then the author claims to have this vision. So I saw one like a human being, and this is the Son of Man. This is Bar Enosh in Hebrew, coming with the clouds of heaven, and he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. So it's important, if you're looking at this, to understand it in the context of persecution. Understand this is being written at a point where people are desperately looking forward to a time and imagining this time when God would come to set things right, which is actually what most prophecy is about, if you actually read it. And in this case, the author of Daniel is imagining this human being coming in the clouds of heaven who's going to set things right, especially because if you read down here a little bit, you're going to see all of the terrible things that these beasts do on the earth. So the idea of the Son of Man introduced in Daniel chapter 7 here does clearly have some form of like supernatural element and is working somehow like in front of the Ancient of Days or the Ancient One. Now, there's two ways to understand this. One way to understand this is an individual. This is a messianic figure. The second way to understand it is that the Son of Man here is actually just referring to people, to like God's people. And if you come and read here, at the end of Daniel chapter 7, it says, the kingship and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all their dominions shall serve and obey them. Now, if we go back up to here, we see that this is exactly what the Son of Man is going to give. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting kingdom. So it could be that the Son of Man is actually a personification of God's people, or it could be that the Son of Man is a sort of messianic figure who will come and lead God's people. And of course, this is certainly the type of language you get in the Gospels for Jesus coming to set things right. Now, people often read this also in alignment with Daniel 9. Daniel 8 also has a Son of Man. It's different in the Hebrew, but it would have, I think, been the same in the Greek. But Daniel chapter 9:25, where am I going here? But Daniel chapter 9:25 also talks about an anointed prince, until the time of an anointed prince. So know then and understand, this is the famous 70 weeks vision. Know therefore and understand, from the time that the word went out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the time of an anointed prince, there shall be 70 weeks, and for 62 weeks it shall be built again with the streets and the moat, but in a troubled time. Now, people have also read this anointed prince and sort of cross-reference this with Daniel chapter 7. There's nothing in Daniel that actually tells us this anointed prince is also the Son of Man, but people kind of read this stuff all together. So you have to understand that, like, in the time of Jesus, people were reading this stuff. You have to remember there was quite literally a war going on in Judea. The Romans had occupied. The Romans were very much like the overlords. And people were reading this kind of stuff. This kind of prophetic literature often comes about in times of great difficulty so that people could look forward to a time when God will set things right, either on earth or in heaven or both. But in this case, often the messianic ideas happen to be on earth. If you look at the literature from Qumran, for example, you get Daniel. Daniel's found at Qumran. And there's also even like more Danielic literature, if I could say that. Like there's another copy of like a vision of Daniel that has something, I forget, like it's even more like recent. So the book of Daniel does give us a Son of Man that's a little more supernatural. It gives us a Son of Man that's before the Ancient One, who has dominion, glory, kingship, all these things. So this is a second possibility, that when Jesus is using the Son of Man, he's using it loaded with this sort of imagery of the book of Daniel. And I don't think this is all there was. If you look at Qumran, you'll see some of the same kind of imagery evolving in the thought at Qumran, among the Essene community there. So Jesus did obviously live at a time when people were drawing on this kind of expectation of a better messianic future. People were drawing on this kind of stuff, and it's reasonable to believe that some people wanted to ascribe this to Jesus as well. So the other important source that we should look at is the Book of Enoch. Now, Enoch is a famous book. It's also kind of weird. There are different Enochic books. The most common one we talk about is called First Enoch, and even First Enoch is a compilation of, 5 or 6 books? It's a compilation of multiple books, and within First Enoch, there's a section called the Parables, or the Similitudes, and in the Parables, we also get this idea of a Son of Man fleshed out. Now, it's important to talk about dating here because we really just don't know. First Enoch, there are parts of it that are much older than Jesus, so parts of First Enoch were found at Qumran, so people were developing this stuff, like in the hundreds of years leading up to the time of Jesus and the Romans. However, this section of First Enoch, the Parables or the Similitudes, that has the most developed Son of Man ideas, wasn't found at Qumran. So we don't know if it was from before the time of Jesus or after. Now, it has so much similarity to the Jesus ideas of the Son of Man we see in the Gospels that a lot of scholars for a long time thought that this Parables, came later and was actually Christian glosses to this Enoch tradition. But I think the majority of scholars right now think that this part of Enoch came from 1st century BC. Now, because of the dating, we can't say Jesus took from this. We can't say anything like that. We can suggest that these ideas were kind of floating around in the ether. So let's take a look at this. So we can start here at 1st Enoch chapter 46, 1-4. And there I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool. This is very similar to Daniel 7, by the way. And with him was another being, whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angel who went with me and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man, who he was, and whence he was, and why he went with the head of days. And he answered and said unto me, This is the Son of Man, who hath righteousness, with whom dwelleth righteousness, and who revealeth all the treasures of that which is hidden. Because the Lord of spirits hath chosen him, and whose lot hath the preeminence before the Lord of spirits in uprightness forever. This Son of Man, who thou hast seen, shall raise up the kings and the mighty from their seats, and the strong from their thrones, and shall loosen the reins of the strong, and break the teeth of sinners. Okay, there's more there. I'm going to stop there, but let's go down to 48, 2-6. You can read all this on your own if you want. 48, 2-6. And at that hour that Son of Man was named in the presence of the Lord of spirits, and his name before the head of days. Yea, before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of heaven were made, his name was named before the Lord of spirits. He shall be a staff to the righteous, whereon to stay themselves and not fall, and he shall be a light of the Gentiles, and the hope of those who are of a troubled heart. All who dwell on earth shall fall down and worship before him, and will bless and praise and celebrate with the song the Lord of spirits. And for this reason he hath been chosen and hidden before him, before the creation of the world and forevermore. So this is interesting stuff, that these ideas were around potentially even before the time of Jesus, because we are here getting into the idea of a pre-existing Son of Man. Let's go to 62. Again, read this all, like it's all good stuff. You can read it all on your own time, but 62, where are we here? 62, 5-9. And one portion of them shall look on the other, and they shall be terrified, and they shall be downcast of countenance, and pain shall seize them when they see that Son of Man sitting on the throne of his glory. This sounds like the Gospels. And the kings and the mighty and all those who possess the earth shall bless and glorify and extol them who rules over all, who was hidden. For from the beginning the Son of Man was hidden, and the Most High preserved him in the presence of his might, and revealed him to the elect. And the congregation of the elect and the holy shall be sown, and the elect shall stand before him all that day. And then it talks about how they will come and he will judge the earth. One more. Let's look at 69:26. Whoops, too far. 69:26. I hope your eyes are okay from the scrolling. 69:26 says, And there was a great joy amongst them, and they blessed and glorified and extolled, because the name of that Son of Man had been revealed unto them. And he sat on the throne of his glory, and the sum of judgment was given unto the Son of Man, and he caused the sinners to pass away and be destroyed from off the face of the earth, and all those who led the world astray. With chains shall they be bound, and in their assemblage place of destruction shall they be imprisoned, and all their works vanish from the face of the earth, and from henceforth there shall be nothing corruptible, for that Son of Man has appeared, and has seated himself on the throne of his glory. All evil shall pass away before his face, and the word of that Son of Man shall go forth and be strong before the Lord of spirits. So imagine a world where this kind of stuff is just in the air. Imagine that this is actually something people are reading around the time of Jesus. And again, I don't have any way of knowing if Jesus claimed to be the Son of Man or if he used that term of himself, but this is kind of the second possibility, that the Son of Man started in Daniel as this sort of angelic figure, and there evolved these ideas in the 100 or so years after. We had these ideas evolving about how the Son of Man would come and be the one who's existing from, can I say, the foundation of the world? That sounds pretty Christian, but that the Son of Man is given this authority to judge the nations, that the Son of Man is going to come and set things right. So these ideas, these sort of, I think we could say, messianic ideas, if First Enoch is indeed from the 1st century BC, this stuff is in the air. And whether or not we think Jesus said this, or whether or not you want to make a theological decision that Jesus was or was not the Son of Man, that's not something I'm going to do in this video. But nevertheless, these ideas are floating around. So you really can get a sense of reading First Enoch, these ideas that potentially, depending on how we date this, potentially were in the air or maybe even influenced a lot of early Christian writers. And I should also say, we do see the influence of First Enoch through the New Testament, but we even see it directly quoted in the letter of Jude. So let's come back to Mark chapter 2 and see this reference to the Son of Man. This is a famous one. Jesus heals the paralytic. So famous story, that's one that I've known since I was a kid, that 4 friends bring this paralyzed man, let him down through the roof to see Jesus. Jesus says to him, Child, your sins are forgiven. Now some of the scribes were sitting there questioning their hearts, Why does this fellow speak in this way? It is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone? At once Jesus perceived in his spirit that they were discussing these questions among themselves, and said to them, Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, Your sins are forgiven, or to say, Stand up, take up your mat, and walk? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I say to you, stand up, take up your mat, and go to your home. And he stood up, and they were all amazed. So there's a use of the Son of Man. He says the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. Now, is this just a humble way of referring to himself? Or is this pulling on these, traditions like we see in Enoch? We don't know if he pulled directly from Enoch, but maybe there were traditions in the air about the Son of Man being somebody who has authority to forgive sins, which we already saw by reading First Enoch, possibly. Let's go forward a little bit. Let's go to Mark chapter 14. Okay, so we have this arrest of Jesus. Let me find Son of Man. There we go. So here's the famous scene before the chief priests. And the chief priests say, the high priest asks him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." So these are really similar to these ideas that we get in First Enoch. And this is one of the reasons why it's probably so absolutely frustrating that we can't actually tell which of these was written first, and we can't really date the parables of First Enoch. But either way, we can see there's an incredible similarity in the ideas here. So those are kind of the main two arguments for what the Son of Man is doing in Mark. One could be sort of a human being. Two could be drawing on all this sort of messianic, angelic imagery from Daniel, from works like it that are circulating, some of which we may have even lost, maybe from First Enoch, and maybe those influenced the Jesus traditions as well. Do you want to know which one I'm leaning towards? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm a little more convinced by the angelic option, because it actually fits with sort of what the Gospel of Mark is doing and giving us this gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God. I mean, I know we could argue about Christology, we could argue about like what we actually mean when what the Gospel writers actually mean when they talk about Jesus, being God or being the Son of God. Like, these are all really, really complicated things, and I can't do them justice in the closing seconds of this video. But that being said, I do see in this something that I think Mark wants to claim, some sort of supernatural claim about Jesus. And I'm not at all saying that means that Jesus was Yahweh incarnate, was, the Greek unmoved mover incarnate. Like, these are later theological moves. All I am saying is that I think some of these heavily loaded messianic ideas might be exactly what Mark wants to pull upon. And I don't even think they're mutually exclusive. It could be both. Jesus may be, to those around, if he's saying Son of Man, maybe people would just hear that as he's a human, but he's actually saying he's the Messiah. Like, there's a lot of different ways you could take this too. So anyway, I got to stop there for now, but I hope this was interesting to you. I hope it clarified the Son of Man a little bit, even though it probably muddied the waters a little bit too, just as it does for me as well every time I look at it. It's never a slam dunk one way or the other. But let me know what you think. I'd love to know in the comments down below which of these arguments you find more convincing, or some kind of conglomeration of the two. If this is your first time here, don't forget to take a second and subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon and I will let you know when I have new videos coming up. You can check out my website, cjcornthwaite.com, and I have a podcast that I'm dropping in like the next few weeks. It's just kind of coming out. I'm not saying too much about it yet, but it's going to be conversations with the world's top biblical scholars, and I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.